Good morning, gang. Happy Thursday. So it's the day that nobody's been waiting for, but everybody seems to be interested in it. Tonight's the debate, and I figured we'd kind of go through a little debate preview here. It ought to be kind of funny to see what happens. I mean, we've seen some great comments in debates before. You go back to Reagan's youth and inexperience comment. You go back to Trump even answering Megyn Kelly's comment about you've called women fat pigs and cows, and just Rosie O'Donnell. There's been some real good comments and debates before. That'll probably be the highlight of tonight, to see which one of our two illustrious candidates can come up with the best zingers. I'm not expecting Joe to get any of those. Tonight's going to be interesting. Joe's spent the last week huddled up in Camp David, memorizing his answers to the scripted questions that he's inevitably already been given by CNN. Come on, Donna Brazile gave them to Hillary Clinton. We know they were given to Biden in 2020. And of course, what man in politics who spent 50 years in Washington needs a week to prepare for the debate? I guess they're digging through Google as best they can to say, Joe, we got to find an accomplishment somewhere. Let's name something that has been successful. Of course, we have the whole topic of the drug test, which is kind of funny. The Biden administration has now declined to do that, which basically is admitting guilt, as far as I'm concerned, that he's going to be hopped up on something. Whether he's going to be drinking a bunch of Red Bulls beforehand, or, the idiot in charge of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, he's not going to be on cocaine. Well, gee, I think he's got a good source to get it if he wants to. But it's going to be kind of funny, because at one podium, you're going to have an inquisition, and at the other podium, you're going to have a scripted reality show. It ought to be really interesting to see what happens. Joe has decided he wants to answer the first. They have a coin toss, and Joe gets the first question, okay? Which means Trump gets the last statement at the end of the debate, which I think is a stupid decision by the Democrats, but that's par for the course, right? So at the very end of all of this, the person who gets the last 2 minutes or minute and a half or whatever they give him for closing arguments, Trump gets to slam them in the last minute and a half. The last thing people will hear is going to be Trump talking. And he should be able to talk about, you just listened to Joe Biden for 90 minutes and nothing he said was true, right? And obviously he'll do it more eloquently than I can. Now, everybody will say, well, gee, there's nothing he's going to say about not being true. Oh, well, wait a minute. One of the rules that the Biden administration put in was there will be no fact checkers at the debate. Of course not, because Joe can't tell the truth. They wouldn't want to have to interrupt him after every sentence going, Joe, that's not true. Joe, that's not true. Joe, that's not true. The really good people comment, from Charlottesville from a few years ago. Snopes has finally come out and said that, no, Trump never said that, even though we all knew it if you watched the entire quote. But they finally admitted that that was not what Trump said. Doesn't mean Biden's not going to keep using that line, because he doesn't have any facts to go off of. So what are they going to talk about tonight? You'd hope it would be their plans for the future. Of course, on Biden's side, that would be, we need to keep doing what we're doing, because, I don't know, the murder of Rachel Morin in Maryland this week, the 12-year-olds, the 13-year-olds, the 14-year-olds in, what was it, Texas, Indiana, I can't remember where the third one was, respectively, all by illegals, raping children, murdering a mother of 5. Let's have more of that, Joe. Why don't you spend your time tonight telling all the women in this country and all the young girls in this country it's not safe to go out of your house under my policies, because that's the truth. God forbid you actually say that. Maybe Joe could tell us about his plans for the economy. That I've got inflation down. Yeah. From the 9% you got it up to, it's down to 3.5%, which is still more than double the 1.4% it was when you took office. Maybe you could tell us about your plans for gas prices, because we see gas prices have come down about a nickel here in the last week or so, because we're emptying out the SPR again. Maybe you could talk about how you've done so much for gas prices that we're not paying $5 a gallon of gas anymore. Except it was $2.20 when you took office. Maybe you could tell us about the 2 wars you've got us into and how great that is. Because now you have Congress talking about reinstating the draft and including drafting women, making it automatic that everybody is draftable. Maybe you could explain how the government is so able to easily draft a kid who's never had ID before, but it's so impossible for people that have had checking accounts, filed taxes. It's so hard for them to get voter ID. Maybe you could explain that one. Maybe Joe wants to talk about crime rates in the United States. Inevitably, this one will come up. Crime rates are down in the U.S., right? We've seen that all over the place. Until you start listening to the cops and go, no, crime rates are way up. Crime reporting is down because they just release everybody and say, oh, there's not enough evidence. Really? What proof do you have of that, Pinball? Oh, I don't know. Let's take a look at the pro-Hamas protesters at Columbia University here last month. And they dropped charges against every single one of the people that were taking hostages, damaging property, public property, okay, locked themselves in buildings, etc., etc. There were about a dozen or so people that refused to have the charges dropped against them because they were standing in solidarity with the people of Hamas. Okay. Maybe Joe will talk about all the great civil rights things he's done. I stand up for LGBTQ rights. Okay. Sam Britton, that guy? Okay, there's just one example. I forget the other guy's name who this week, another issue you have. What was it? The head of the LGBTQ Democrat outreach in, I believe it was Maryland, was arrested this week for soliciting a teenage boy. Okay. Yeah. There you go. Maybe Joe will give us another one of his great lines on, if you don't know who you're voting for me, if you're voting for me or Trump, you ain't black. Let's see, would this be the same Joe Biden that wants to lock him up in chains or, says there's smart kids and white kids, those lines. The guy who voted against the civil rights, supported the people who voted against civil rights, called them friends. Would it be the same guy who said he was arrested in Selma with Martin Luther King, right? All this sort of stuff. Yeah. Would it be that guy? The guy who passed the 1994 gun law? That guy? Yeah. Who's completely crapped on the minority communities in the country for his entire 50 years? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But there's a lot of cannon fodder that Trump has to talk about. Joe won't tell us anything about his plans for the future because he doesn't have any. But Trump may talk about his plans for the future, and the Democrats, the moderators, of course, will completely try to shut him up. Talk about those, again, deporting all illegals, right? And of course, they'll stop him somewhere on that one, going, it's not possible, yada, yada, yada. It's very possible. It's actually relatively easy, could probably be done in 6 months. Maybe he would talk about his plans for ending the war in Ukraine. Joe wants to keep it going. Trump wants to end it. But again, we want to go into Joe's civil rights. He's not worried about all those innocent Russians or innocent Ukrainians that are being killed. Joe's still getting his 10%. Okay. Maybe Trump could talk about supporting Israel as opposed to talking out of both sides of his mouth like Biden does. Okay. We got to remember, after 6 or 7 presidents that promised to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, Trump actually did it. Yeah. Friend of Israel? Yes. Friends of Hamas? A terrorist organization? That would be liberals. Tonight's going to be really fun to watch. I put up that survey yesterday. I mean, I knew what the response was going to be. I was actually surprised that it wasn't 100%. Out of 5,400 votes on the survey, 99% of you said that nothing that's said tonight will change your vote. I agree. Won't change mine either. I mean, an act of God couldn't get me to vote for Biden. The only thing that would possibly get me to vote for Biden is if the voting machine changes my vote. The national average, okay, the national polls on this, a little more scientific than mine, said 82% of the people won't have, nothing will change their vote. Yet 87% of the registered voters in this country, I think it was according to Rasmussen, said they are going to watch the debate tonight. I'm going to try. I'm going to see what I can watch through. Find it somewhere on YouTube or something and watch this just because I need a good laugh. It's going to be fun to see how Joe steps on his schwanz left and right. See how many times he passes out, mumbles, stumbles, bumbles, fills a diaper, whatever. I want to see what happens. It ought to be must-see TV. It's not a debate, okay? Because a debate would be two people, point, counterpoint. No, this is two DNC operatives asking a loaded question to Trump or a softball question to Biden. The whole objective of tonight is to make Trump look bad. There's no question. What's going to be most interesting for you, me, and the rest of the world to see is how presidential, how diplomatic each one of the candidates can come across. In Trump's case, in holding off hostile moderators. And if he does it calm, cool, and collectively, the rest of the world and the American public is going to see him as a statesman. When Joe starts yelling and screaming, which you know he's going to, that's when they will see an unhinged lunatic who has no business of being in the White House, making decisions, or certainly having the nuclear football around him at all times. It's not a debate, okay? It's, like I said, an inquisition. It's specifically an attempt to get Trump. Tonight, the world is going to get to see the two of them face to face. The election could probably be held tonight, and it would be within 1 percentage point of what the results will be in November, not including any cheating. Okay. The big question is, do we still have an election in November? I'm still 50-50 on whether it happens. We're now hearing all the talk about bird flu is in New York, and are we going to have a pandemic? One of y'all was telling me yesterday about being in the bank and them measuring off social distancing again, even though it was already admitted to Congress that that didn't work. This bank supposedly was doing it. I haven't seen it myself. I'm just telling you which one of y'all told me. After tonight, we'll see when Joe gets his ass handed to himself. Even Nate Silver came out and said there's a 67% chance that Trump is going to win the debate based on his polling. Nate Silver was the 538 guy. Joe's going to step on it, and it'll be interesting to see if Joe steps down after this, what the feedback is tomorrow. I mean, of course, CNN and MSNBC and all the network news channels will say Biden won, just like they said Biden won in 2020, and that was a joke. Okay, Biden got his ass handed to him then, too. But they'll all say he won, but they'll know in the back room what happens to Joe. The post-debate polling will be interesting. Trump is already now up in national polls by 4 points. Okay? He's leading in every swing state. It's just going to get worse for Joe after tonight. And the Democrats will probably see we need to pull him. Now, I've said for months, I don't see Joe being on the top of the ticket come November. Tonight's the night that Joe probably meets the Grim Reaper. Not putting him in a box, but his political career will end tonight. There's two kinds of people in this country. There's patriots and there's traitors. The patriots are Trump supporters. The traitors are liberals. Don't believe me? Adam Kinzinger was a perfect example. Traitor. Pinball out.